I want to start a new series on my YouTube channel called The Essentials of Playing Rogue. And this series is going to take a look at different fundamentals that newer players or people that haven't played Rogue before kind of overlook. And for this first episode, I want to focus on movement and spacing. And later in the video, we'll talk about movement in a PvP situation, but for right now, I want to talk about movement in the most basic sense. So movement in the most basic sense is just pressing A, W, S, and D. And you'll see it kind of looks a little bit clunky, but it gets the job done. And people that casually play and move this way is totally fine. But if we want to improve in PvP, especially on a class that has a lot of prerequisites for using our spells, we need to be able to move in a different, more efficient way. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be right-clicking. And when we right-click, we'll turn our camera, and it'll turn our character model as well. So we're still going to use AWS&D to move around, but we'll be able to orient our character in a way that kind of fits the situation that we're in PvP. And I know everything is kind of high speed, especially when you get into a PvP situation, but being able to effectively maneuver your character is essential in kind of getting better at PvP. So another cool thing about this is when we right click and move our character, if we press A and D, it gives us access to right and left strafe without even having to press Q and E. And generally Q and E is bound to strafe, but with this method you don't really have to worry about having those bound. You can bind those to other spells, you can do whatever you want. So this is something that you're going to have to practice on. It's hard to get used to, and there is a setting that allows you to change your look around speed, and that's just in your controls, and you'll go down to mouse look speed, and this will help you, either turn it up or down depending on what you prefer. Um, but like I said, this is something that you need to get used to doing when you're in PvP in order to get better. So let's kind of get in the more nuanced look in terms of how rogues use this movement in PvP, and let's get into the first clip. Before we get into the movement aspect of this clip, I'd like to kind of establish a way of thinking that I think is vitally important when it comes to PvP, especially in the open world. When you have time to assess what class you're fighting, I think you need to kind of have a game plan before you decide to go in. So here we can see it's a warrior. And with warriors, we know that our movement is far superior, especially when we're using crippling poison. So we're going to use that to our advantage here to get behind the target and make sure we get as many backstabs off as possible. And one last thing before we get into the clip, with World PvP and Warsong Gulch PvP, there's actually a 20% debuff on damage in Warsong Gulch. So in World PvP, that will really affect how you decide to approach a matchup versus if you were to fight somebody in Warsong Gulch. So saying all that, let's get into the clip. Running up to the target, we need to assess whether we can use ambush or shadow strike. In this case, we're close enough, so we use ambush. And you can see me start running towards the warrior, and I'm trying to run through the warrior to get to his back, and we're able to get a backstab off with 2 combo points. We use between the eyes to lock him down and immediately get behind his back again so he can't move out of it. We're able to get another backstab off. Obviously, we're weaving in auto attacks the entire time. We see between the eyes has fallen off, so he starts moving away from us, trying to get his back where he can't be backstabbed. He tries to face us, but we keep weaving in auto attacks. We immediately use our mobility to get behind him and use a backstab, and we finish him off pretty effectively here. Notice how throughout this entire fight we've used our movement principles effectively. We've right-clicked, we've pressed AWSD, and we got to the warrior's back. With different builds, our approach to movement will be just a little bit different, and we'll go into that in the next clip. So this is a little bit of a longer clip, but I think it kind of encapsulates spacing and movement very well. So you can see that we open with an ambush like usual. Note we are playing a Mutilate build, so our objective here is going to be a little bit different. Instead of trying to get behind the target, we're going to keep the target in front of us and use our spacing in order to keep him at range, especially knowing that the warrior lacks mobility and we have crippling poison on. So what we're doing is we're weaving auto attacks and using Mutilate on cooldown and then backing away. This will give us time to regen our energy. Unfortunately here I step a little bit too far back and step into charge range. You see there I had 3 combo points and used an exposed armor. And using exposed armor, especially on classes with heavy or high armor values, is very important. I prefer it over rupture. And you can see him trying to charge up here again, so I go inside of charge range. I hit him with another Mutilate and start backing away and do the exact same thing over and over again. So I proc my gloves there, and then I hit him with a between the eyes. Unfortunately, he trinkets this between the eyes, so I have to go in and use a Mutilate and then weave in auto attacks. But here you see us using our strafing technique that we were talking about previously, as I start strafing away, but I'm still getting auto attacks off. And he dies to a poison there, and that's because we were using our strafe correctly.